Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Melissa Conway with Texas Right to Life. I'd ask you to go ahead and like this video, share this video. Why? Because we would like for your friends and your family to go ahead and get plugged into helping you and us advance a culture of life across the pro-life state. Well, today's a pretty special day, and you might ask why. Well, today is actually World Down Syndrome Day. Groups in countries all over the world use March 21st to raise awareness about Down syndrome and to celebrate people with Down syndrome. Sadly, the stigma and the myths still surround the condition, and studies have estimated that between 67% and 92% of babies diagnosed with Down syndrome in utero, they're aborted. It's sad and it's unfortunate, but World Down Syndrome Day is a truly wonderful opportunity for you to join us to combat these common myths about Down syndrome and the misinformation, and to show the world what living with Down syndrome is really like. What we like to say at Texas Right to Life is everyone deserves a birthday. And I like to say because every life is beautiful. People on the front lines fighting for more birthdays are the pregnancy resource centers. Pro-life advocates and the pregnancy resource centers, they're actually potentially on the cusp of a crucial victory for free speech rights of the movement. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments for the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates versus Becerra. Now, many justices, including those of the ideological left, they were skeptical of the argument presented by the state of California. Now, the state of California was defending a policy designed to compel anti-life speech from pro-life pregnancy resource centers. So joining us today, I'm really pleased to say we've got our legislative director, John Seago. Thanks for joining us, John. Could you tell us a little bit more about this case and details surrounding it?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So this is a case where pro-lifers in California are challenging an anti-life law that was passed in 2015. And the Reproductive Fact Act, as it's called, was a state law that required two basic things. First, it required that some pregnancy centers put up notices saying that no licensed providers oversee the services that they provide at this clinic. And secondly, it requires some pregnancy centers to put up notices that say, to essentially advertise that women can go get other medical services, including abortion, that is paid for by the California government at other clinics. And so really what these pro-lifers were doing in California is challenging this law that they saw a kind of compelling speech that goes that completely contradicts the fundamental purpose and mission of this clinic. It's a pro-life pregnancy resource center. They want to provide these women with life-affirming options in the case of an unexpected pregnancy. And this law requires them to advertise abortion, which is the very reason they exist, to give women better options than elective abortion. And so those pro-lifers were challenging this state law, and it has been kind of worked its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they had their oral arguments, as you mentioned, yesterday.
That's great insight, John. Both provisions of the California law, however, they appear vulnerable. The longtime swing vote on the court, Justice Anthony Kennedy, he actually appeared to be skeptical of the law, and I was really pleasantly surprised to see that Kennedy and the other justices, they not only took pause and review of the merits of this case, but what are your thoughts on the feedback provided by the justices?
Yeah, that's right, Melissa. In addition to Justice Kennedy, who's the swing vote, as you mentioned, in addition to that, you have Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that icon of the ideological left. She even expressed some skepticism about the law because of the burden it puts on free speech. And she highlighted the fact, something that I mentioned, or that I failed to mention earlier, that the law requires these signs, these notices to be posted in 13 different languages. I mean, so just the burdensome nature of the policy was really highlighted even by Ginsburg, who was skeptical. I mean, you saw Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kagan, you saw all of these, various justices from different sides, different political philosophies, skeptical of the California's arguments, and kind of highlighted that the California, if they have such an interest in this message about free abortions being free services, including abortions, being advertised to these women, they clearly have the means to do that. They could put up their own billboards. They don't have to require these pro-life organizations to advertise it for them. And that's specifically problematic, they pointed out, for the point that the law only applies, it kind of narrowly applies to pro-life pregnancy centers. It's not as if this applies to all medical centers or other clinics that are doing reproductive health. It's, in their own words, it's just this is tailored for pro-life pregnancy centers to force them, to compel them to say things that contradict their purpose and mission as an organization.
Well, I know that Texas Right to Life has kept a watchful eye on this case because the free speech rights of pregnancy resource centers, other pro-life organizations, and activists alike have often faced egregious affronts. John, can you tell me what types of similar attacks to our freedom of speech have you personally witnessed in Texas, and more specifically, Austin?
Absolutely. So Texas Right to Life has seen many attacks on free speech rights, specifically for pro-life advocates, organizations, students. We've seen that all around the country. And actually, Texas Right to Life has been leading in the pro-life movement by pointing these out and by making the case that this is critical to the pro-life movement. And so we've seen specific attacks here in Austin, very similar to the law in question in the NIFLA case that attacked pregnancy centers. So in the Texas legislature, anti-life Democrats have filed legislation to regulate and to really stifle the speech of these pregnancy centers, specifically with things like requiring them to post signs outside their buildings that say we don't do abortions, or for pregnancy centers to even read specific scripts that has a message contradictory to their purpose and their mission, as well as requiring them to even refer for or point to where a woman could get an abortion if she wanted one. And so we've seen these bills filed throughout the legislature. Thankfully, Texas Right to Life has been successful in pointing these out, of how these are unconstitutional attacks on these pro-life centers and their free speech by compelling them to say something not related to the services that they're providing in that facility. A lot of times it's counseling, it's letting them know of their life-affirming options, and so these kind of attacks on free speech happen in the legislature, and we've been able to fight these Democrat bills back from getting out of committee even.
Are such attacks on free speech unique to Texas Democrats?
No, not at all. We've seen attacks not just from the Democrats, but from liberal Republicans in Austin as well. So, there's a lot of kind of Strauss-era politicians who were in leadership under the liberal House leadership of Joe Strauss, and they have filed legislation, tried to pass legislation, even come very close, needing vetoes at some points for legislation that's aimed to on our free speech as a pro-life organization. Trying to hamper our effectiveness during elections, or trying to qualify how we can report on what happens in the Capitol and remove protections from us from reporting on what we see happening in the Capitol, and or specifically coming after our supporters, people who have, regular citizens, not politicians or lobbyists or anything, but regular citizens who have decided to partner with Texas Right to Life for other conservative organizations and really targeted them to come under political attack. And so, we see these plethora of attacks from these, and that's one thing that Texas Right to Life and other conservatives are going to have to continue to watch, even next session, is all of these attacks on free speech that may be on not necessarily a pregnancy center, but our organization, our supporters, our ability to kind of call out what we see happening in Austin and make sure we can run effectively, have effective campaigns whenever we're trying to hold them accountable during election season.
Are there any other negative impacts or fallout from the intended efforts to actually limit free speech?
Yeah. So another area that Text Right to Life has been involved in is we have seen this kind of nationwide strategy or trend of kind of stifling conservative voices on college campuses. And unfortunately, that trend has spread to Texas. We've seen on our in our higher ed institutions, there has been discrimination against pro-life students, pro-life organizations on their campus. And Text Right to Life, we testified even just recently, we testified before the Senate State Affairs Committee that was looking into this issue, clarifying all of the cases we've seen of pro-life students or pro-life organizations on campus really being discriminated against, not because of anything not because of anything other than their pro-life message. These are students that are bringing a necessary but uncomfortable kind of message to their college campuses, and that has ruffled some feathers by administrations, college administrations, or other student groups, or even professors that don't want pro-life conversation to be as loud as it is, thanks to some of the great pro-life students we have across the state. So that's kind of another one that we've been involved in on college campuses. The Senate is poised to file some legislation and work on that issue. We're going to be involved in that. But at the end of the day, Texas Right to Life knows that the pro-life movement is not going to be as successful, is not going to be able to effectively end the injustice of elective abortion or to protect vulnerable Texans if we are not able to freely and effectively communicate our life-affirming message. We do bring an uncomfortable message that abortion is unjust, that it is an act of violence, that there are other acts of violence and victims across our state. And we want to not only pass protections for these in the State House, but we want to be able to talk about those issues on college campuses. And then most certainly we want our pregnancy centers to be able to meet with those those women facing unexpected pregnancies, to be able to freely communicate the pro-life message there without compelled speech that would confuse the issue, that would complicate the issue, that would violate rights and undermine the ministry that's going on there at the pregnancy center. So this is a big issue of free speech. That's why Texas Right to Life was watching the NIFLA case so closely and will continue to pay attention because there could be some really good outcomes here in protecting pro-life speech. And there's also an element of what it does to some of our informed consent laws. So on our website, we have a pretty good analysis of the arguments that are being made and how a bad ruling in this case could affect more than just free speech rights. Go to TexasRightToLife.com if you want to read more of that analysis. This should be a case that all pro-lifers are watching carefully.
Well, thank you to our Legislative Director, John Seago, for joining us today and actually shedding light on the importance of this case. Now, even though a ruling determining the fate of this ill-advised California law could be narrow in scope, the outcome of the case could affect the entire national pro-life movement. The Supreme Court is expected to announce a ruling sometime this summer. Onward to current events. The Young Adult Life Link, affectionately called YALL, invites young adults in their 20s and 30s this Thursday to Little Woodrow's for a networking happy hour. Now that is tomorrow, March 22nd. Please do join us to meet new friends and like-minded peers at Little Woodrow's in the Heights. Besides the opportunity to network and to win a great door prize, you will also have the chance to hear about the results from the March 6th primary election and how you can press onward to save innocent life in Texas. Please do RSVP at TexasRightToLife.com/events. We look forward to seeing you there. Last but not least, if you know of a pro-life high school student or teen who simply wants to learn more about the pro-life cause and join you and join me in advancing the culture of life across the Lone Star State, well, we invite them to Team Life Camp. Now, Team Life Camp will be held April 13th to 15th in Kerrville, Texas. students aged 14 to 18. They're going to enjoy a fabulous weekend of campfires and new friends and discussions with like-minded pro-life peers. So please mark your calendars to ensure that you have an opportunity to invite any and every high school student that you know across the state of Texas to join us. We don't want them to miss this fun, and we want them to join in this enlightening weekend. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you join us today. We ask that you go ahead and check back with us next week where we'll have more pro-life updates. In the meantime, again, don't forget to like this video, share this video, and likewise, if you've got comments or questions, don't hesitate to put those down below, because our staff at Texas Right to Life, we love to communicate with you and engage with you. And it's great to hear from the heartbeat of Texas. Join us again soon. Bye, y'all.